Good evening.
Good evening, George. This is Michael Vera with Late Night in the Midlands. How are you?
How you doing, Michael?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Good, good. Well, I want to thank you for taking time out to be with us tonight. And, um, well, I gave off some bio, but maybe you'd like to start off with a little more background. I know that, I guess from my research, that Richard Hoagland was a big part of your interest in Mars. Is that true? Or maybe you give us a little background on how you got down this road.
Yeah. Well, like a lot of people that are interested in the Mars research, beginning with the face on Mars, I was uh, introduced to all of this information by Richard Hoagland in his first book, "The Monuments of Mars," and that's basically how I got, hooked on all of this stuff. And Richard Hoagland had, as like I said, the book "The Monuments of Mars." I had ordered that, and I was very interested in that. And actually, over time, I actually got to work with him very briefly in some of the research that we were doing. Bill and I, William Saunders and I, in our first book.
He kind of got me interested too. I'll be honest. Back in the day, I'd listen to Art Bell and hear him on there, and I just really got me thinking about Mars a lot. And so I've got a huge interest in it now. And I was on your site today looking at those pictures. Oh, just some fantastic, fantastic imagery. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, no problem. Um, well, basically, this journey of ours with basically William Saunders and I started on the old website that Richard Hoagland had. He had a discussion board on there at his original Enterprise mission. Back in the mid 90s, the discussion board on the Enterprise mission, you didn't have to pay to be on there. It was open to the public. And there was a lot of discussion going on there, and people were, highly anticipating, waiting the new images of the face on Mars. And during that time, that's when I met William Saunders. And him and I seemed to have very similar views about what we were doing, and we were very intrigued by how Richard Hoagland envisioned the face on Mars to be a bifurcated formation. And that's been a real stickler for a lot of researchers, and the big problem with the media and the public is that, NASA has continuously tried to present the face on Mars, if it was a face, as a symmetrical face. And in reality, the structure that's on the surface of Mars is bifurcated. It's a two-faced structure, which Hoagland had seen in the original Viking images. And once NASA took the higher resolution images with the Mars Global Surveyor in 1998, that actually verified what he was looking at in the old Viking images. So what we were seeing was a humanoid face on one side and a feline on the other. And early on, a lot of speculation was that this was Egyptian, and of course with the headdress and the line and the feline, with the Sphinx type of embodiment that you see in Egypt, we have the human and the feline. So that's what started all this with us. And however, once we got the newer images from the Mars Global Surveyor, which were higher resolution, we started to see actually more information in the face on Mars, with the symbolism of the headdress, and there was like a symbol of a tri-leaf symbol at the forehead, and which led us on a different road than a lot of the researchers that were looking for Egyptian type of iconography. And we were picking up on more of the Mesoamerican type of imagery that we were seeing, which over in Mesoamerica you have the same type of idea that you have in Egypt with the feline and the human. In Mesoamerica, back to the Olmec culture, there was this obsession with this transformation of human to jaguar, and that's what we ended up finding to be more prevalent in all these structures that we're finding on Mars. More than the Egyptian, is more related to Mesoamerican stuff.
Well, that's fascinating. And I know since then, though, I know Richard Hoagland. Him and I don't exactly see eye to eye on everything, but he has done some he certainly has opened some eyes. I'll say that.
Yeah, well, one of the greatest things I think he did was to open up the possibility that what we were looking at with the face on Mars was not a symmetrical face, but a bifurcated face. And again, a lot of academics, they think that, everything is idealized, like you have the Greek and the Roman sculptures and the artwork, which is very symmetrical, and all this, the Western art, uh, but they're not looking at New World art, which is American Indian, Maya, Aztec, even down in South America, the Peruvian art. That's a whole different way of looking at the human body and art. Down there, you have bifurcated, and you have really complex composite images with different aspects of different animals and hybrids, and it's very complicated. And if you're to find artwork on another planet, the simplest thing would be to find a McDonald's sign and say, "Oh, look, we found civilization." But it's a lot more complex than what we're thinking. And what we're seeing on Mars is this motif and iconography that's coming right out of Mesoamerica, not symmetrical art. But there's also symmetrical art also. But
So then, so then that face on Mars is you're saying it's actually two-sided, like a two-face, I guess.
well, it's more in line with the type of stylistic art that you would find in the New World, where it's a combination of, you got composite art, you have bifurcated figures and bifurcated faces, and you also have symmetrical art. It's an accumulation of all that type of style, as where in other cultures, where you have the Greek and the Roman and even Egyptian is very much more of the symmetrical or the profile.
Yeah, and I've often thought that too. That there was a lot of similarities to what you see in Egypt and what's being spotted in pictures on Mars, like these pyramids and
Well, what Bill and I did in our research early on in our first book with the Martian Codex, we actually realized during the research. I mean, we had no idea about Maya culture. We knew more about Egyptian culture, just from media and history and what we learned in college and high school. Your academic teachings of what the traditional view of these cultures were. But as for Mesoamerica, we didn't know much more than what we got from National Geographic. They thought that the Maya were just this strange culture that worshipped numbers and the stars, and we had really no idea what was going on until we started doing research on our own and reading, scholarly books about the subject. When we, went down that path. But what we're finding is that a lot of these formations that are on Mars have this really direct correlation to Mesoamerican art.
yeah. So I know NASA said that they had at some point took close-up pictures, and they tried to convince people that look, all um, I guess the what would you call it? Just faded away. I can't think of the word. Anyways, the features is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, you're talking about you're still talking about the face?
Yeah. Uh huh.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you're looking at a portrait of the Mona Lisa and you stand back and you get the correct viewing distance, you see the face, you see the smile and the beautiful eyes and everything. But if you zoom in and you get close, like you do with a high resolution Mars reconnaissance orbiter camera, and you zoom in onto the surface, and you're looking at the the rubble and the surface. With the painting, you're looking at the brushstrokes, and it all looks abstract. And you're like, this is not a painting. This is just all textural paint swirled around. You really have to know how to look at a piece of artwork, because what we're looking at on Mars is artwork.
Yeah.
These structures are artificially designed, and they have a real specific purpose. And they're to zoom in on things and say, well, look at this. This doesn't show any. And people are looking for, well, where's the blocks? Where's the building bricks? Where's the mortar? I mean, we don't know how these formations were made. Were they just carved? Or is it just carved rock? Was the face on Mars initially just a mound that was transformed and carved into this image? So there wouldn't be any, mortar and brick.
Well,
You know what I'm saying?
and I was going to say, after how many millions of years or billions of years, there might not be, you wouldn't find that maybe anyways.
Right. It would all be, from all of the wind erosion. I don't know how much. I mean, I've had these discussions with my co-author William Saunders about, how much wind is actually generated on Mars because of the low, atmosphere and the gravity. How much damage is this wind making? That NASA talks about these little wind storms that swirl around. But in the springtime, you can go outside and see these little tornadoes swirling around. They don't really do much damage. They're not going to deface your brick building with these little, 4-foot high tornadoes that go around. These silly little wind spins that go around. I mean, how much energy are these things producing on Mars to make the erosion? So it's to decide or make an evaluation of how old these things are is pretty, lame, really, to try to figure this out without actually being on the planet and doing some real geology. I mean, we're just looking at images here.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes if, and I've had a guest on who thinks it might be so that there was, Earth and Mars were both, once both populated at the same time, and there was probably, visits from each other because
Well, with all of the imagery that we're seeing with these geoglyphs of these spatial formations and figurative things and structural formations, and if you compare them to comparable structures and artwork on Mars, uh, Bill and I are thinking that these structures on Mars really can't be that old. And I'm working on this new book, which is not what we came on here to talk about tonight, but my next book that's coming out deals all with bird formations. There's an area in formation of the Cydonia area, way above the face on Mars, that we have a dozen avian formations that are all basically contemporary-looking birds. And through evolution and this type of process with the evolution of birds, the birds that we're looking at that are formed on Mars are birds that we see today. We're not looking at prehistoric type of birds. We're looking at birds that, we're seeing a pelican, a parrot, a hawk, what else is there? There's a woodpecker and all kinds of roadrunner and things like this. These aren't animals that are prehistoric. These are, modern-looking birds. So if someone was to produce these images on Mars, they would have to be representing something that's more contemporary as opposed to billions of years ago.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up. That the birds and different animals that are seen, that they're it's what we have now. So that's kind of I don't know. That kind of mixes it up a little bit, don't it? It's
right. So we're thinking, what is this? These structures are maybe no more than 20, 50 million years old, or 50,000 years old. I'm sorry.
Wow, that's not that long ago.
No.
Oh, that's
so it's a dark period in our history that we have forgotten.
Hey, have you seen the new picture that's come out? I just seen it. I think yesterday or the day before. But it looks like a man standing and doing some kind of repair or something on the rover. It's a shadow.
Oh, what with the shadow?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm not sure what that is. It may be just the way the rover was sitting there. Sometimes when you do shadows around things, it'll start to look like things. I don't know what that is. And
Right.
I don't know how valid the picture is. So.
Yeah, I don't either, but I thought it was interesting, and I'm thinking
Right.
it's probably the sun reflecting a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the things that we work with, especially with we just had the science paper published with the famous Queen Nefertiti face. You have to have multiple images of these formations. And that was one of the most important things to get this paper published. Originally, NASA only took 2 old Mars Global Surveyor images of this original image, and they were released back in 2001, and we had to wait like 8 years before NASA took additional pictures. That's why this science research takes so long, because none of these journals are going to publish a paper if you want to do some research on something you're looking at. You have to have other images that corroborate what you're looking at. And, the way NASA takes pictures, just as an example, this research that we've been doing at the Society for Planetary Study Research, headed by J.P. Levasseur, this has taken a long time. We can request images, and it just takes forever for NASA to get around to taking additional pictures of these. We have to see if it's just a trick of light, as NASA constantly said about the space on Mars. It's just the way the picture was taken. So we have to have multiple images, and with this paper, we have actually 4 different views of this profile face, which confirm all of the features. And that's the game we have to play here with NASA. We have to wait until they take pictures, to give us more data to look at.
Do you ever find it's difficult to get a hold of, certain images that, do they claim that, we don't have those? Or, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that they hold back some stuff from you?
Well, anytime we find an anomaly and, it seems worthy of research, of course, people involved will send the NASA has the public targeting program, so we can request images, but, they don't normally, do them every time you ask for something. You can't say, well, we want to see a picture, another image of this formation that looks like what people have called Queen Nefertiti. You have to give a geological reasoning for them, to take the picture.
Ah.
So you have to go a roundabout way to say, we want to look at some type of surface feature that finds interest or has a geological, interest to people or other researchers for them to make a picture of that.
Right. So, what I'd like to do is, if you would, give out the website where people can go and look at these pictures. 'Cause I know you've got a lot of pictures on your site that I was going through. I do have you linked up on the homepage, but there might be some who are listening and not on the website. So if you want to give that out for anybody, you may do so, because I think it'd be great if they went over and took a look at some of these.
You mean the Cydonia Institute?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if any of the listeners want to go over to just go to Google and type in the Cydonia Institute, we have a whole section on the website which has some of the articles that we've written, Saunders and I, about some of the formations that we're looking at. And you can also go over to the Society for Planetary Study Research, and they have a whole section of published papers that have been peer-reviewed and published in scientific journals.
Oh, nice. Now, you had told me when I emailed you to come on, you said it was perfect timing because you and William Saunders had just published a science paper. So if you'd like to dive into that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, the science paper that we were working on was actually the image. Most of the people on the internet that follow this, it's been retitled the Nefertiti face, but the original discoverer is a member of the Society for Planetary Study Research. His name is J.P. Levasseur, and he found this back in 2001, and there was actually 2 images originally, 2 Mars Global Surveyor images of this, and but you can't do much with 2 images. Most science papers, if you're dealing with something that is on Mars, that is a geoglyph or some type of anomaly like this, they want to see confirmation in more than 2 images. So there's at least 3 or 4 images you have to have before they will even consider looking at these papers. So back in 2001, we had this, and it's been all over the internet for years. And we had to wait actually until the Mars Global, or the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the HiRISE camera, took additional pictures of this back in 2009 and 2010. This area was very, NASA had a lot of interest in this area for some reason besides this portrait of this young woman that's there. Their reasoning for taking it, they took like 10 different images of this area. So we had a lot of images to choose from to put this paper together. And there was only 2 or 3 of them that were of higher quality that we were able to use in the paper. But they were supposedly, besides studying this evolution of this formation, they said that they were studying the dust raising events. They were monitoring how dust storms were affecting this area. And through our research, what we think that this Nefertiti portrait, or this profiled portrait of this young woman with the headdress, what we think is creates this formation is that at some point this formation was etched into the surface, carved, deep ruts, kind of like you have the NASCAR lines where the red clay of the surface comes up when they carve these pictographic images. And I'm sure you're familiar with the NASCAR lines, the monkey, the spider, and all the features that are there. And basically what supposedly how they were created was they just gouged out the soil and they made these lines. And that's basically how this profile portrait is created. It's etched into the surface. And the reason that the lines are dark is because there's this dark material or this fluid that's coming from an ejection fault, which is right above it. This is what we're trying to figure out how this liquid is coming down, filling the. You imagine having a desert area and you're like etching these, or taking a tractor and digging these big grooves around and creating this image, and then the image is filled with this liquid from this maybe there's a dark liquid source that's near this area that's filling these crevices. So that's what gives this profile face its form, and which is being able to be photographed. So you have this dark outline of this figure. So in the paper, that's basically what we go into. Saunders and JP try to describe how they think this thing is formed.
That's interesting. And now, when you talk about these geoglyphs,
Right.
We've got that, here on Earth as well. And I would imagine that that's what a lot of these things, these things that are being picked up in pictures on Mars, I would guess that, some of it was meant to be seen from the sky. And it seems like, we did that here too, back in a time when we weren't supposed to have the technology to do these things. So, again, I see connections. It's like,
well, yeah, a lot of people aren't aware that American Indians, all through the Midwest, in Wisconsin, there's all of these mounds that are shaped like bears and birds and animals.
yeah,
A lot of them have been destroyed through cities and farming. The whole city of Chicago was built right over an ancient Indian pictographic area. So a lot of this stuff has been lost, but there's still a lot of formations that are still around that people can look at. There's bears and birds, and of course there's the famous serpent mound. So the ancient peoples produced these things on Earth. You got the Nazca lines and things like that, and that's what we're seeing on Mars. We believe is that the same type of idea of creating these geoglyphs, to be viewed from above, and that's exactly what we're seeing here with the profile face on Mars that has been called the Nefertiti face.
so I guess what I would ask now is there enough? I mean, is there enough to prove to? I mean, I know. I mean, you don't got to prove
Right.
nothing to me, but to prove to I guess the mainstream of people that, hey, there was life on Mars once. There had to be, because these things didn't just grow up there. I mean, somebody built them.
Well, there are so many examples of geoglyphs on the surface of Mars that I think any logical person, if they were presented with the evidence, showing all of these different examples, and even if they thought that one of, showing them maybe 50 different examples of these formations, which I could do.
I know you can.
And if they were to believe that just one of them wasn't natural, I think that would be an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, and I could say, okay, one or two could be a coincidence,
Right.
and you hear the scientists tell you all the time, these brain scientists say, well, the brain is designed that way to, it's trying to figure out what it's seeing.
Well, we'd be seeing faces everywhere and having accidents going to work.
That's very true.
If you want to turn that around on them, you'd say, well, if the human mind has a propensity to see faces, then an intelligent civilization that was to produce geoglyphs on another planet, he would make them to look like faces because we'd see them easily.
Very true.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does make
sense.
And
the other level of evidence is that, not only are we seeing all these geoglyphs beginning with the face on Mars, and Bill and I had our Parrot formation published a couple years ago, and this is our second one that we had published, that all of these formations have a direct correlation with Mesoamerican iconography. So you have images on a planet that are observed and photographed repeatedly. So it's not just, weathering or just the trick of light. These things are consistent in NASA photographs, like we have with this profile image. We have 4 images showing the same formation. Even though, NASA's saying they're studying the dust storms in this area, because, the dust is filling up some of this dark fluid that's coming in, so it's obscuring some of the face. But, in the next season it comes back because this stuff is seasonal. But anyway, so we have all of this evidence, and it's just overwhelming that there's something, going on Mars more than just, erosion that's causing these, facial formations.
And now, would there be any formations that you're seeing on Mars that would tell you that there had to have been a connection between Earth and Mars, or anything that, we could say pyramids and stuff.
Just as I said, all of these things we're looking at have a connection with the culture on Earth, and even the birds. If these were just exotic birds that had nothing that, they kind of look like birds, but they were like, hybrids and different birds that we've never seen before, that would be a different story. But we're seeing birds on Mars that look just like birds here. And we're seeing, faces like the profiled face here, the Nefertiti face, it looks just like a young woman. It looks human. This is all us.
Wow.
We're not seeing monsters.
Well, no, we're not. And it's almost like if they did it, I don't know, even 50,000 years ago, it seems like, it was meant for a future. Like they knew somebody was going to be coming to see it. It's just amazing to me how
somebody was coming home.
Yeah, exactly. And that could very well be home. That could be where it all started. Now, I don't know if you've heard of.
That's what it's starting to look like.
I don't know
and
if
someone left us these pictographs to say, "Hey, looky here."
Yeah, and we looky at.
Right, but with the politics here, we're not going anywhere. We're just looking. What we need to do is go to Mars and get some ground truth and find out what's going on there. Because a lot of these formations are probably, there's structures inside. They're not just like the Nazca lines where you have just land drawings on the surface. I think, things like the face on Mars, that's a huge structure. There's probably all kinds of things like Richard Hoagland had fantasized about, being a huge library. And it's probably what a lot of these things are. And even in Peru, the Peruvian architects built a lot of the structures there, like the city of Cusco was shaped like a crouching tiger or a puma. And there's other images of some of the structures that were shaped like birds, were shaped like llamas. So when you look at these buildings from the air, they look like animals. But on the ground, they were structures with buildings and rooms and things, and they had, I guess, roofs type of formations on top of them. So we're seeing the same thing on Mars, except the roofs aren't blown off.
Yeah, and I'm willing to bet that if you were able to walk on Mars and go to that face, that there would be, uh, doors
There's
that
a
lead.
door somewhere.
Oh yeah, I bet you there's doors that lead inside. Now, I understand there's a structure too. Now I've seen images; it looks pretty amazing, and maybe that has to do with the face on Mars too. But that almost looks like the Sphinx in Egypt as well. It's almost it's got that Egyptian type look. But then I've had someone else tell me that's not what it was. It was something I forgot what
Where's that at?
um, I don't know. I think a guy by the name of Gary Legier, I think, sent me a photo that he had come up with, and there was a few pyramids, and then it almost looked like it wasn't exactly like the Sphinx, but it was close. It was the face looked so much similar. And,
Yeah, I know Gary well. I've known him for, God, probably 15 years.
yeah,
Gary has a great eye for finding structures and
he
geoglyphs
does.
on Mars. He's one of these guys that he's home all day. He doesn't have a job. His job is going through NASA photographs, and this is what he does. And he really has an eye for catching things. He has found some. I have a whole file here in my computer with Gary's stuff, and it's like, God, he's got probably 3 or 4 books worth of stuff.
Yeah, he's got quite a bit. I mean, it's just amazing the stuff he finds, and
It's like, my God, every day he's posting something. It's like, wow, Gary, what is that? Where is that?
Yeah, exactly, and I trust him. So
He's the Mars revealer.
he is the Mars revealer.
He's on a quest.
Yeah. Now I just seen an article recently. They said that they're thinking that there could actually still be lake water on Mars. What do you think of that? You think there could it could still be, I don't know, somewhat habitable? Maybe not for a human, but maybe there's certain animals or insects that could live there.
Well, I've been looking at this stuff for a long time. I don't know how much water is on the surface, considering the atmosphere. But NASA has over and over said that they know there's water like 3 inches under the surface. I mean, that close. And I'm sure if we get down into some of the deep valleys and Valley Marineris and things, I think if we went down to the bottom of that, we'd probably find water on the surface because of the pressure change. But and we see all these images of these big crater impacts, and we got seeps that looks like water or dark oil coming down the sides. I mean, there's evidence of water all over the place. But that information about the large lake, I think they were talking about this whole crater was filled with water. NASA's always saying millions and millions of years ago. I don't think it was that long ago. But there's no question that that Mars has water. And the big question is, where did it go, and why is it, went down into the surface? And as for life, I don't think there may be microbial life. I don't really see any evidence of any creatures running around. I know there's a lot of stuff on Facebook and some of the websites where they show these blurry images of the things that look like animals or something. But rocks can look interesting and look like animals at certain lighting. But you need to have, like I said, you have to have multiple photographs of these images. And the other problem with NASA is that anytime they see a rock that doesn't look like a rock, they drive away from it and they go to the rock. That seems to be their forte there.
Yeah.
Because you'll see pictures of the panoramas, and you'll say, "Oh, that rock over there, that doesn't look right." But NASA never goes over there that we know of.
Well, yeah.
They drive somewhere else, over to a rock that looks like a rock, and they'll do a sampling and test it and go, yeah, that's a rock. And then they'll drive right past the machinery that's sitting next to it that looks like, somebody's carburetor that's been out there rusting for, 1,000 years.
I guess
they don't go close to those.
Yeah,
I know. They only get the slightly blurry pictures of those.
I guess
it's just, you You don't know what the heck's going on. It appears like at one time there was a mass war going on, and there's all this rubbish all over the ruins and parts of vehicles and all kinds of things blown up.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. Brandenburg talks about, you know, the big war on Mars where there was a nuclear explosion. I don't know if you had him on.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask you if you were familiar with him because
yeah,
I had him on.
He studied the isotopes and everything, and he's got like overwhelming evidence that there was 2 nuclear explosions that went on Mars, and they weren't natural.
Yeah, and he even thinks that it's possible that at the same time that Mars was nuked, Earth might have been as well, because he said there's evidence here of something like that happening a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and that all, you know, you go down the rabbit hole there with all of the Anunnaki talk and Zachariah Sitchin of the NK and his brother fighting and all this kind of stuff. You know, it may be history.
That's very true. No,
and not myth. So,
yeah,
like I said, the best way to solve all this is actually to get a group of scientists and go to Mars.
Yeah, I wish they'd do a public, though. I wish they'd say, okay, here's the channel, go to this channel, we're going to have it live, constantly, 24/7. I think that's the only way I trust them.
Well, the British tried it, with their Mars Express, but, with the Germans, and then, NASA got involved with Malin, and that was the end of that release, of any kind of information. So, NASA was right in there with the British program of the Mars Express. So,
no, they're playing gatekeeper.
Excuse me?
I say they're playing gatekeeper.
Yeah, another country wants to do some exploration of Mars. We'll help you.
Yeah, they'll help. All right, George, we got to take.
That's all right. We'll monitor the monitors. That's okay.
Yeah. We got to take a break here, George, and then we'll come back and talk some more. Now, also, the dolphins, what role do they play in all this? It seems like there's a lot of symbolism with dolphins.
Yeah, a while back in our first book, we were working with an image of a dolphin in the Cydonia Institute, or in our first book, the Cydonia Codex. Yeah, there's a couple dolphins in the Cydonia area. One in particular is over by the formation called the Fort, and the other is just around the area of a large mesa called the Animal. So there's 2 dolphins that we know of. And, the dolphin's a symbol of duality in ancient cultures. The dolphins are actually mammals, they're not fish. So I guess the ancients were intrigued by the whole idea that dolphins could live out of the water. They dive up out of the water, back into the water. They're able to breathe. The Olmec, back in Mesoamerica, that was one of their sacred animals, was the dolphin, because they again saw it as a symbol of duality. Again, with the face on Mars, you have the idea of duality with the human and the feline. It's the same idea. So we're seeing the same connection with a lot of these formations that we're finding on Mars, with this repetitive information about duality. Of course, in Egypt, you have the Sphinx with the human and feline also.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Hey, anything on mermaids? We've seen this Animal Planet mermaids thing, and I don't know, any sculptures or anything of those guys up there, because that would be interesting.
No mermaids.
No mermaids.
That I've seen. but again, you're dealing with human and fish. It's the hybrids, the transformation type of idea. In Mesoamerica, you have fishmen. You have men that are half human and half fish. You have the fishmen in the Sumerian culture, where they came out according to the ancient Sumerian culture mythology. These mermen came out of the ocean. They came out of the water, and they half man and half fish. So it's kind of a universal mythology.
Uh-huh. Now, somebody asked about the city center pyramid. They said they call it, or the main pyramid it is.
The main pyramid, yeah. That's in Cydonia.
Okay, and anything special about that? I mean, there's other things around it. I understand, and but they asked me to ask you about it.
Well, we have a whole chapter in our first book on the main city pyramid, which has pictographs around the side of it. And there's actually 4 different pictographs, but in the first book, I think we only discussed 3 of them because NASA didn't give us another image of the other side. Hopefully, if we do a revised edition of the first book, we'll be able to put that 4th geoglyph. But all around the main pyramid in the Cydonia area, there are these pictographic formations, which again have iconographic and the motifs of Mesoamerica, gods and mythology.
And another one was somebody had mentioned the Viking one, and I've looked at that, and that's just, I mean, come on, that's not a trick of the eye.
Yeah, well, the Viking is one of the half profiles that are around the main pyramid, and there's the 4 different pictographs. Not only are they half images around the side of the pyramid, which includes the Viking-looking image, which has these braids that hang down are actually serpents. Now he's Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, and above him there's this big serpent with breathing fire, and these images are just amazing. And all of the 4 different pictographs around the main pyramid are all interlocking, they're all related. On one side there's a jaguar, or water lily jaguar, which is connected to the Quetzalcoatl image. So in the book we discuss how all of these things are not only half images, but they're all intricately related with each other. So it's not just random images that we're seeing.
I see. So
and if the listeners out there want to take a look at that, they go to our website, or they could hopefully order our books. The Cydonia Codex, our first book, which came out back in 2005. So this is like coming up in, I think, September will be a 10-year anniversary of our first book. God almighty.
Wow.
And our second book was out in 2009 called the Martian Codex.
I see. Now, have you taken an interest in any other planets out there, or moons? I understand there's some moons, a moon of Saturn that they believe could have water, and I just read a article in the beginning of the show of a miniature solar system that they have located that they say could be, the origins of where it all came from. And they said that it had 5 Earth-like planets in the Goldilocks zone.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
yeah, I haven't heard that one, but myself, I've been kind of focused on all these things that I'm finding on Mars is kind of consuming my time.
Staying close to home, huh? I don't blame
you. That
you.
seems to be my focus. I mean, I'm not really a scientist, although I play one on the radio. No, not really. My background is art. I'm a sculptor and a painter. I used to be the director of the New Jersey Sculptors Association. So my background is in the visual arts, and so that's what I bring to a lot of this research and working with geologists and all the other people that are doing these papers that I'm working with. So what I bring to this is the artistic interpretation.
Well, 10 years since your last book, so I would consider you an expert on the subject as well. So,
well, Bill and I put out the 2 books, and we had 2 science papers published: the Paratopia, or the Parrot Formation paper, back in 2011, and then we just had this image of the profile image, which most people know as the Nefertiti face. The books took probably 4 years to write, 5 years to write, and it's about the same thing with the papers. These papers are very time-consuming, and working with the other researchers and going back and forth and rewriting, it takes a long time. The Parrot paper took us about 6 years to write, believe it or not. And this current paper was about 3 years in the making.
Well, that
And
means
we have another paper coming out hopefully in April, which we're going to submit to the Space Technology and Applications International Forum in April, which we've been working on for about 3 years.
Well, that just means that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's.
Well, science is slow.
Yeah. Well, we have a call. We've got Ira on the line. Ira, welcome aboard, and thanks for joining us. He's a host on the network, and he's a frequent flyer here. Hello.
Hi, Michael. Hi, George. How you doing?
Okay.
Hi, Ira.
George, you were just saying that you come from an artistic background, and actually I really have to commend you for getting involved in this kind of thing, because I think that when it comes to all of this stuff, the fact that it's just strictly scientists looking at this stuff and that sort of thing, I think actually does a disservice. It is all about kind of the amalgam of all different backgrounds and all different fields trying to look at things, because when people look at it from one strict type of background, they miss a lot of stuff.
Well, academics, they're very focused, especially geologists and people that are trying to equate what we're seeing on Mars with the Earth's geology. They get so transfixed in, looking at the surface and the rocks and the formations that, they don't see the forest for the trees, as they say. They may be looking at a geoglyphic formation, and they're not looking at any of the artistic aspects. They're looking at, how did that eye form? I mean, they're not seeing it as an eye, possibly, if we're looking at an eye, nose, and a mouth. They're saying, well, how did that, that ridge there form the lip? They're not saying lip in their mind, but they're looking at the formations, and they're trying to figure out how these formations were made. And, a lot of them are just totally oblivious to, any type of artistic aspect of this. And once that's brought to their attention, they step back and they go, ooh, that's different. I didn't think of that. But, they're thinking on the different side of the brain.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually falls right into the duality type of thing that you were talking about, that when it comes to all of this stuff, you have to look at it from both sides at the same time in order to actually get the right idea of what's going on with it all.
Right. And of course, nature can make mounds and formations that look like a bear and look like a tree and look like this or that. It looks like a squirrel. But what we have to ascertain here, from my artistic point of view, is that what are the anatomical features? I mean, what is the cutoff point where we go, well, you're looking at a cloud and you see like an outline of a face with a nose and looks like an eye indentation there and some hair. I mean, is that just clouds or is that an actual intentional work of art? And what we have to establish is, where's the breakoff point? What is the level that, we see this thing has 10 points of anatomical correctness. So, maybe nature may be 5, but here we're seeing 10, and we're seeing detail. We're seeing the iris and the eye and the eyelash. I mean, that doesn't form naturally. I mean, you can have an eye formation and say, well, that's an eye. It's just an orb or an almond shape, and say, you could say, well, that looks like an eye. But we're seeing things here on Mars that, it's not only an almond-shaped eye, it has an iris, it has a lid, it has eyelashes, it has an eyebrow. I mean, then you're getting into the field that this is intentional. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So it's basically like the difference between intentional art and Jesus toast, essentially.
Yes. And a lot of those are manipulated anyway. I mean, the guys turning it with iron, go, I got the eye in there. But
definitely.
If it's like, Carl Sagan with, the Jesus and the potato chips, try to dismiss everything. But yeah, I mean, nature can make these things. But normally those type of things are very general. They're outlines or they're just generic. But, and you can't waste your time looking at generic formations and saying, well, it's only that way because of all the erosion and, you can't see it. You have to find something that has more substantial quality. Like the parrot formation that we worked on for 6 years. I mean, that had 17 points of anatomical correctness. We had 3 different veterinarians look at it and give an analysis, and they were blown away, and they thought it was artificial. Plus, we had 2 geologists look at it and say it was not real. It had to be artificial. So, these are the levels that you have to look at.
It's fascinating. It really is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
When you were speaking about the dolphins thing earlier, it really reminded me how they attributed the importance to dolphins and that sort of thing. It reminded me of Douglas Adams saying that the dolphins were actually here to watch us humans, and they were the actual sentient species on the planet.
Well, they are pretty smart.
Yeah.
They are, but they're getting slaughtered in the cove. So you think that they would, finally walk up out of the water and roll up their sleeves and say, "All right, enough of this."
Had enough of you humans. I'm sick of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard them talk, and they could be cursing us out. I don't know.
Yeah, they just might be. So,
Right.
in the end game of all of this, where do you see all this going in the future? Where do you hope that it goes?
Well, with the Society for Planetary Studies research that I became a member of after having the parrot paper published, being a member of this organization of scientists. I mean, like I said, I'm just an artist, but this organization includes astronomers and engineers and physicists and geologists and archaeologists, and we're trying to get these formations to be looked at by mainstream scientists. One of the goals of the Society of Planetary Study Research is to get these papers published. And, like we're on your show tonight, and when this paper came out, we're sending press releases out. We're trying to get public attention that, these formations are out there and they're being looked at, through a scientific eye. And it's not just, being thrown out there on the media that, look at this, rock kind of looks like a rat on Mars, and, everybody has a laugh and we move on. This is serious stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Another place that really piques my curiosity, and it's even a lot closer to us, is the moon. Have you taken any close looks? Because I've had people now, I don't know how legitimate these are, but I've had people send me pictures and videos where apparently it looks like there's even pyramid-type structures up on the moon in some of the areas. So I don't know.
Well, the moon is another story. I really haven't done a lot of research with the moon images because we really don't have any new images of the moon. We have all the stuff that the Apollo missions took, and they took them out the window, and the resolution's pretty poor. But there's just with the images that we have, there appears to be a lot of strange things on the moon. And then, of course, we have all the pictures that the astronauts on the surface took, with their handheld cameras, taking pictures of rocks that look like machinery again. It looks like the same thing we're seeing on Mars with like all this debris everywhere. And, I'm thinking maybe this is why we don't go to the moon. Because when I was in high school, we were supposed to be going to the moon in the 80s and 90s and having little colonies and going back and forth and, having your summer vacation on the moon.
Yeah.
But I guess it's kind of difficult to take people to the moon and set up bases when you look out the window and you see, ruins of cities and, blown up machinery all over the place.
Yeah, that's true. And
that appears what it looks like. But, you've seen Hoagland. He's got that picture of the debris field there that has the android head and all this stuff laying all over the place. I mean, I've seen other images, but stuff that looks very much geometric and things that don't look natural, like parts of buildings and things that are all over the place. So that may be why we don't go there. I mean, it's only 3 days away.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And doesn't China have, don't they have something orbiting it, taking pictures? I mean,
yeah, they had an orbiter up there. They landed and, they had a rover go around and look at things. And, Hoagland thinks they were looking at ruins. I mean, if you go on his website, he's got a whole paper about it. But, we really can't, nobody's going there. Why?
That's a good question. It's so close. I mean, my God, we can go back and forth.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that big of a chore. So,
well, it's kind of difficult when you have members of Congress that when we landed the rover on Mars, had public statements that we should drive the little rover over there to see the flag that we planted in the 60s. I mean, these are the kind of congressmen we have. So, I don't think we're going there anytime soon. And that really happened.
Yeah.
So.
They're not known for their scientific aptitude in Congress.
No.
No. So what do you think, Ira?
Well, for me, I think that if there was a civilization there, which I do not doubt at this point, I think that there is more than enough evidence to show that at least something was there at one point in time. But it always reminds me of the thought that if something were to happen to our civilization and 10, 20,000 years was to pass by, there'd be nothing left of our civilization but debris fields and spikes of steel sticking up here and there and that sort of thing. It would nature would essentially wipe it off the face of the planet. And, we see that with past civilizations that were here as well. Why
Right.
couldn't that happen there on Mars? I think that there's enough evidence to show that at least the potential is there, and the fact that people are so closed-minded about it kind of drives me up a tree. It's like, why are you precluding the thought that that is even a possibility,
Yeah.
Well, I think the government knows, and they just don't want the public to know that there was some type of, horrific devastation that happened on Mars. There's evidence, like Dr. Brandenburg talks about in his new paper in his current book, about some type of nuclear war on Mars. I mean, it has direct correlation with our history and our origins, and I think this is what happened with Mars. Mars was destroyed, and they just don't want us to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the big possibility is, and one thing that I've thought for many years now, is that at some point in our history, whatever happened there, it jumped from there to here. So, like, maybe their planet was being devastated, so they came here, and
Right.
we're kind of the
We
offshoots
are
of
the Mars,
that.
as they say.
Right, exactly.
Well, yeah,
And the public just couldn't take the thought that we came from another planet and just turn everything upside down.
And not only
And if we came here, did we bring animals with us? Did we bring these images? Like I was saying earlier about all these birds in them.
well, it may very well be that. I was just going to say, it may very well be the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is that why evolution is such a mystery? Because we came here and turned everything all upside down, and presented different species here, or who knows what. It just gets to be fantasy at that point. But it opens up whole different levels of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And it may very well explain the stories of like the arcs and that sort of thing in our history. Maybe the arc story is relating to us coming from there to here, and we brought DNA here and started it all over here and all that kind of stuff.
Just read the Revelations in the Bible. It sounds like there was a big war somewhere and we came here.
Exactly.
That whole apocalypse in that chapter of the Bible may be history from, something else that happened. It didn't happen here.
See, now I could accept that. I could accept that, because that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that what's in the Bible, people are describing what they seen, whatever the heck it was. That's what they seen. It's their accounts, their experiences, or whatever. And it could very well. I've said that. I think that it wasn't Noah's Ark. It was Noah's ship, and I mean spaceship.
Right.
Yep. Yep, it's something that I've thought for many years. And again, why don't people accept just even the thought that that is a possibility? It just kind of drives me a little stir crazy.
Well,
yeah, and it appears that the planet died, and because everything we're seeing on Mars, these geoglyphs, they were put there after Mars was dead. So what it appears to be is that the planet was destroyed in some type of horrific war. They came to Earth and then went back to Mars and put up these pictographs. They built all of these things that we would see, in a future date when we were able to do space travel and go and do satellites that went around and took pictures and said, hey, look, that looks like a face down there, which is the first calling card, which Hoagland calls, the face on Mars, to get our attention. And, of course, all these other pictographs. What Bill and I think is that all of these geoglyphs on Mars are like a Bible. They're a story. They tell a creation mythology about our human, lineage.
yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me. I kind of follow that idea as well. That it's something like a geographic marker or frequently asked questions type of thing. It's just kind of a marker saying, okay, war happened here. Here's what happened. Do not enter. This land is radioactive. That sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like in 2001 Space Odyssey, where you take over Europa.
Yeah.
Stay out of Cydonia. Don't come to Cydonia, whatever you do.
Well, and that's just it. We've got, had messages. Everyone says, oh, well, they make contact. I think they have. It's just, we think we're so smart, we overlook everything, It's, and not to mention it gets hidden from us, of course. But things like this, I mean, I could probably, go to most people who don't listen to shows like this and show them pictures like that, and they would try to blow off every one of them because they would believe that, no, if that was true, they would tell us. No,
right.
It's just not the way it is.
Yeah, well, we've had in our own human history here on planet Earth, there are different civilizations or different language structures that are symbology based. They don't even speak; they just draw on the ground, for instance, and that's the way they communicate with each other.
Right.
Why isn't this a possibility as well? Maybe they communicate in the same type of way.
Well, all over the entire planet, we have evidence of ancient cultures creating these huge pictographic formations of animals and things. So, and we're seeing the same thing on Mars. It's like a human tradition.
Right.
It's a family tradition.
Right, which again is part of the reason why I think maybe something hopped over here.
Right. Yeah, there's too many similarities.
And I wonder what would we have left of us, of our history. I mean, everything's on computers and paper, and right. I mean, would if something happened here and I don't know, millions of years went by, would another civilization be able to come here and tell that there was outside of what our ancestors did here or whoever did it?
Well, you're right. In probably another 100 years, I mean, there'll be no books. There'll be no, everything. You'll have like these glasses that you wear and have all the, Google and everything will be right there for you to learn and communicate. And back in the day, you had telephone poles and you had all this evidence of communication. Now we have everything in the satellites and GPS and all this stuff. It's kind of like Zechariah Sitchin spoke about with the Anunnaki. They had these little boxes that they used to communicate, and they had satellites. That's why there was no evidence on the ground. And we'd have the same thing in the future. They'd say, "Oh, these Americans weren't that advanced. Where's the telephone poles? Where's this or where's that? Where's the machines?" There would be nothing. Just this little disc that they would think were artwork.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they'd find a few things in a cave and say, "Oh, they were living in caves."
Yeah, I mean, if they found these reflective CDs, they'd say, "Oh, these were probably mirrors,"
Or they find graffiti from a bunch of teenagers going in and getting drunk and writing on the cave walls. Well, that was our civilization.
Yeah.
Find the evidence of the condoms. Oh, they must have been a sexually fascinated type of culture. And
well, it's like Ryan said one night here. You go ahead and bury very deep in airtight container the books of Harry Potter, and see if maybe a million years from now somebody digs it up and they read that stuff. What would they think?
They would think it was like a history.
Yeah, exactly.
Or mythology.
Yep.
Yeah.
It'd be Greek mythology to them.
Yeah.
Interesting. So then you look at Mars and we say, well, look at the geoglyphics and the structures that they've left behind to show us that they were there. But then let's look at Earth again for a minute. And we didn't build the structures and geoglyphics that are here that people might see after we're gone. And so will they think that we did that when, in fact, I mean, are we thinking that the last civilization on Mars may have done that when it could have been even further back than that? Because if they had the technology to come here, I mean, maybe they were just like us, technology-wise, and pretty much destroyed themselves. And any history of their civilization now that might be ancient Mars civilization, more ancient. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right.
it'd be like 10,000 years from now if something were to happen to us today and we got erased. Basically, 10,000 years from now, another civilization finds the ruins at Baalbek, and oh well, that must have been our civilization.
Right. Right.
Right. Exactly. Or if the Nazca lines are still there, they think those were. They can't be that old.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well,
As long as it doesn't rain, I guess.
it's a shame because we could learn a lot of things from Mars, and I don't feel like there's some, and I'm one of them. I guess I think that there's more going on on Mars than we think, and I don't mean like people are playing soccer and throwing footballs around up there, but that there I think that we might already have people there. I don't know. It's just a thought that they're already set up, they're already investigating it, and they're looking for a way to tell us, in the long run that, this is what it is. I think there would be some people who would, go a little crazy because of their religious beliefs. But, I say to hell with it. Let's get the truth. I don't care if, Bugs Bunny put us here. I just want to know how it all happened.
Right.
So.
I don't disagree with that at all. It's like, well, and two, think this way as well. When in our past, our civilizations were disrupted really heavily by whatever events happened, approximately 11,000 years ago here. There's a lot of different things that go into that. But science has now shown that we're descended from about 5,000 people that were alive during that time period, the survivors, you could say. And the civilization...
Being pulled down pretty small.
Yeah. The civilization that we have now is built up from that time period. Well, what if they had technologies that were there, that they had been handed down for many, many generations? The people during that time period, they'd be just focused on surviving at that point. They would no longer really be trying to save their technology or anything like that. They would just be, okay, we have to figure out how to survive here. Maybe the same thing occurred.
Right. Well, yeah, it's all relative. It's like, who knows how to build a light bulb or a computer? I mean, if there was a catastrophe that happened tomorrow, it's like, how many people would be left that would actually know how to turn the lights on?
Right, your general zombie apocalypse. Who's going to know how to fix Who's going to know how to fix the transformers to be able to get the power back on?
And guys, that's the kind of thing I think about sometimes when I'm just sitting there and twiddling my thumbs. I think if everything was to get destroyed now, and maybe a few handfuls of people survive, would we be lucky enough to have anybody in that bunch that would understand how to get any kind of a grid back up or anything like that? And
you're like, I got to start learning.
You almost feel that way. You feel like I better start studying this stuff. But I hope somebody is.
And you got to wonder too, the survivors that are there. The strong survive, right? So the guys who are going to be dealing with, okay, well, we need to get food, so we're going to rob this person and this person. They may be killing off the people that knew how to do that stuff,
Right.
Yeah, very true. Well, George, we're getting down there on time, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you the floor to get out any information that you'd like, and direct people to wherever you like. If you got any appearances coming up or anything like that, you're welcome to go ahead with any of that. And anything you'd like to get out there, please go ahead.
Well, all I got is that, we came on tonight. I came on to speak with you guys about our new science paper about the profile face, which has just been published in the Journal of Space Exploration. And if you go to my Facebook, George J. Haas on the Facebook, or go to the Cydonia Institute or the Society for Planetary Study Research, you can get some information about, and hopefully the listeners will go to the online version of the paper and read it over, and hopefully get back to us and tell us what you think. I have 2 books. If the listeners are interested, we have the Cydonia Codex. You can go on Amazon.com or go to our website, the Cydonia Institute, order a copy. We'd love to send you an autographed copy. We have the Cydonia Codex and our second book, the Martian Codex. Uh, I've had two science papers published. The paper we did in 2011 on the Parrot Formation, which is a pretty exciting formation on the surface of Mars. Besides the Parrot, there's a whole area of ruins above the Parrot and the wing area. Pretty amazing. Mike Barra also did, I think, a chapter in his book about that. Did you have Mike on?
No, I haven't had him on yet. I haven't been able to connect with him. I know he used to do work with Richard Hoagland. I don't know if he does anymore. And I think
right. Well, he's working now with, I think, Ancient Aliens, and he's put out a couple books. And he did a whole chapter on our discovery of the Parrot Formation on Mars, which was pretty cool. And right now, what I'm just finishing up is our third book, which deals with all of these bird formations in the Cydonia area, which hopefully will be coming out at the end of the year. And that's about all I got.
All right, great. Well, George, thank you so much for taking time out with us tonight. And when you get the new book out, please get in contact with me. I'd love to check it out and hear back from you.
All right, Michael. Oh, one more thing.
Sure.
Last year we submitted this profile formation to the Space Technology and Applications International Forum, which takes place in April in Arizona. This April, hopefully, we'll be submitting our third paper, which deals with the famous crown face.
Oh, nice. All right.
Which was discovered by Greg Orm.
Well, keep me posted.
Heard of the crown face.
Yeah, keep me posted because I'd love to check it out. All right. Well, thank you, George, and we'll keep you linked up on Late Night in the Midlands. And have a great night, my friend.
All right, Michael. Thanks again for having me on.
Oh, you bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody. George Haas and
the Enterprise mission, you didn't have to pay to be on there. It was open to the public, and there was a lot of discussion going on there, and people were, highly anticipating, waiting the new images of the face on Mars. And during that time, that's when I met William Saunders, and him and I seemed to have very similar views about what we were doing, and we were very intrigued by how Richard Hoagland envisioned the face on Mars to be a bifurcated formation. And that's been a real stickler for a lot of researchers, and the big problem with the media and the public is that, NASA has continuously tried to present the face on Mars, if it was a face, as a symmetrical face. And in reality, the structure that's on the surface of Mars is bifurcated. It's a two-faced structure, which Hoagland had seen in the original Viking images. And once NASA took the higher resolution images with the Mars Global Surveyor in 1998, that actually verified what he was looking at in the old Viking images. So what we were seeing was a humanoid face on one side and a feline on the other. And early on, a lot of speculation was that this was Egyptian. And of course, with the headdress and the line and the feline, with the Sphinx type of embodiment that you see in Egypt, we have the human and the feline. So that's what started all this with us. And however, once we got the newer images from the Mars Global Surveyor, which were higher resolution, we started to see actually more information in the face on Mars, with the symbolism of the headdress, and there was like a symbol of a tri-leaf symbol at the forehead, and which led us on a different road than a lot of the researchers that were looking for Egyptian type of iconography. And we were picking up on more of the Mesoamerican type of imagery that we were seeing, which over in Mesoamerica you have the same type of idea that you have in Egypt with the feline and the human. In Mesoamerica, back to the Olmec culture, there was this obsession with this transformation of human to jaguar, and that's what we ended up finding to be more prevalent in all these structures that we're finding on Mars. More than the Egyptian, is more
pictures on Mars, like these pyramids and
well, what Bill and I did in our research early on in our first book with the Martian Codex, we actually realized during the research. I mean, we had no idea about Maya culture. We knew more about Egyptian culture, just from media and history and what we learned in college and high school. Your academic teachings of what the traditional view of these cultures were. But as for Mesoamerica, we didn't know much more than what we got from National Geographic. They thought that the Maya were just this strange culture that worshipped numbers and the stars, and we had really no idea what was going on until we started doing research on our own and reading, scholarly books about the subject when we, went down that path. But what we're finding is that a lot of these formations that are on Mars have this really direct correlation to Mesoamerican art.
Yeah. So I know NASA said that they had at some point took close-up pictures, and they tried to convince people that look, all the I guess the what would you call it? Just faded away. I can't think of the word. Anyways, the features is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, you're talking about you're still talking about the face?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you're looking at a portrait of the Mona Lisa, and you stand back and you get the correct viewing distance. You see the face, you see the smile, and the beautiful eyes and everything. But if you zoom in and you get close, like you do with a high resolution Mars reconnaissance orbiter camera, and you zoom in onto the surface, and you're looking at the rubble and the surface. With the painting, you're looking at the brushstrokes, and it all looks abstract. And you're like, this is not a painting. This is just all textural paint swirled around. You really have to know how to look at a piece of artwork, because what we're looking at on Mars is artwork.
Yeah.
So these structures are artificially designed related to Mesoamerican stuff.
Well, that's fascinating, and I know since then, though, I know Richard Hoagland. Him and I don't exactly see eye to eye on everything, but he has done some. He certainly has opened some eyes. I'll say that.
Yeah, well, one of the greatest things I think he did was to open up the possibility that what we were looking at with the face on Mars was not a symmetrical face, but a bifurcated face. And again, a lot of academics, they think that everything is idealized, like you have the Greek and the Roman sculptures and the artwork, which is very symmetrical, and all the Western art. But they're not looking at New World art, which is American Indian, Maya, Aztec, even down in South America, the Peruvian art. That's a whole different way of looking at the human body and art. Down there, you have bifurcated, and you have really complex composite images with different aspects of different animals and hybrids, and it's very complicated. And if you're to find artwork on another planet, the simplest thing would be to find a McDonald's sign and say, "Oh, look, we found civilization." But it's a lot more complex than what we're thinking. And what we're seeing on Mars is this motif and iconography that's coming right out of Mesoamerica, not symmetrical art. But there's also symmetrical art also. But
so then that face on Mars is you're saying it's actually two-sided, like a two-face, I guess.
Well, it's more in line with the type of stylistic art that you would find in the New World, where it's a combination of, you got composite art, you have bifurcated figures and bifurcated faces, and you also have, symmetrical art. It's an accumulation of all that type of style, as where in other cultures, where you have the Greek and the Roman and even Egyptian is very much more of the symmetrical or the profile.
Yeah, and I've often thought that too, that there was a lot of similarities to what you see in Egypt and what's being spotted in pictures.
And they have a real specific purpose, and they're to zoom in on things and say, well, look at this doesn't show any. And people are looking for, well, where's the blocks? Where's the building bricks? Where's the mortar? I mean, we don't know how these formations were made. Were they just carved? Is it just carved rock? Was the face on Mars initially just a mound that was transformed and carved into this image? So there wouldn't be any, mortar and brick.
Well,
You know what I'm saying?
and I was going to say, after how many millions of years or billions of years, there might not be, you wouldn't find that maybe anyways.
Right. It would all be, from all of the wind erosion. I don't know how much. I mean, I've had these discussions with my co-author William Saunders about, how much wind is actually generated on Mars because of the low, atmosphere and the gravity. How much damage is this wind making? That NASA talks about these little wind storms that swirl around. But in the springtime, you can go outside and see these little tornadoes swirling around. They don't really do much damage. They're not going to deface your brick building with these little, 4-foot high tornadoes that go around. These silly little wind spins that go around. I mean, how much energy are these things producing on Mars to make the erosion? So it's to decide or make an evaluation of how old these things are is pretty, lame, really, to try to figure this out without actually being on the planet and doing some real geology. I mean, we're just looking at images here.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes if, and I've had a guest on who thinks it might be so that there was, Earth and Mars were both, once both populated at the same time, and there was probably, visits from each other. Because
well, with all of the imagery that we're seeing with these geoglyphs of these spatial formations and figurative things and structural formations, and if you compare them to comparable structures and artwork on Mars, you know, good evening.
Good evening, George. This is Michael Vera with Late Night in the Midlands. How are you?
How you doing, Michael?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Good, good. Well, I want to thank you for taking time out to be with us tonight. And, well, I gave off some bio, but maybe you'd like to start off with a little more background. I know that, I guess from my research, that Richard Hoagland was a big part of your interest in Mars. Is that true? Or maybe you give us a little background on how you got down this road.
Yeah. Well, like a lot of people that are interested in the Mars research, beginning with the face on Mars, I was introduced to all of this information by Richard Hoagland in his first book, The Monuments of Mars, and that's basically how I got, hooked on all of this stuff. And Richard Hoagland had, like I said, the book, The Monuments of Mars. I had ordered that, and I was very interested in that. And actually, over time, I actually got to, work with him very briefly in some of the research that we were doing, Bill and I, William Saunders and I, in our first book.
He kind of got me interested too. I'll be honest. Back in the day, I'd listen to Art Bell and hear him on there, and I just really got me thinking about Mars a lot. And so I've got a huge interest in it now. And I was on your site today looking at those pictures. Oh, just some fantastic imagery. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Well, basically, this journey of ours with basically William Saunders and I started on the old website that Richard Hoagland had. He had a discussion board on there at his original Enterprise mission. Back in the mid-90s, the discussion board on